thewellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives. Download the app today.
This is Up for a Chat with your hosts, Cyndi and Kim Morrison.
Here we are, up for a chat, talking about the hottest topics that are important to you, inspiring you to awaken the change within. I'm Cyndi O'Meara.
And I'm Kim Morrison. What a treat we are in for this week. We have the incredible Richar Game with us this evening today, whenever you're listening to it. This amazing soul, Cyndi and I are so excited about. We've actually decided that he's a soul brother of Cyndi in particular. He is very passionate about creating a paradigm shift in a way that we view health, performance, and well-being through leadership and a culture of excellence. Talking my language. In my personal practice, he says, he uses a combination of functional and evolutionary medicine, precision and personalized medicine, and our favorite, biohacking. He brings a systems-based, holistic and multidisciplinary approach that recognizes the body's ability to heal while harnessing technology and innovation. This is something that can drastically reshape people's lives, health span, lifespan, and the entire healthcare system as a whole. Ultimately, this amazing soul is all about helping people live better and more fulfilling lives. Welcome to Up for a Chat, gorgeous Richard.
Thank you for having me. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation.
Well, we talked a little bit off air. We noticed there's a Canadian twang there. Maybe before we get into your philosophy and all the training, I was also particularly interested in the word performance, which kind of sounds athletic to me. Yes. So I'm wondering if you'd take us on a little journey as to where you're from, how you got into this, and what has been the biggest turning points for you in your life so far.
Sure, right. I could probably go on for many hours, so I'll try to condense as much as possible. But as you said, so Canadian born and raised in Toronto for most of my life. I've been in Australia for just over 9 years now. So I'm coming up to that point where I feel I've been here long enough now that I start to identify as an Australian more and more, which is great. But having grown up in Canada, I was very fortunate that my family was always very active, typical sort of Canadian. Grew up playing ice hockey along with many other sports. And I do have to specify ice hockey, which I've learned that I have to clarify. It's not field hockey. And through that journey, just always being involved in sports and activity, there was always that performance side of things that was always at the center of my mind. So from a very young age, again, very much thanks to my family, I was always looking at ways to improve my health and ultimately improve my performance, because you can't have one without the other. And over the years, that just grew and grew as a passion of sort of trying to learn more about the body and learn more about how to improve myself. And inevitably, that sort of led to doing formal education through academia. So I did somewhat of a pre-med early on. And then that actually just sparked even more of my curiosity. I became even more enamored with biology and physiology. And when you learn about how the body functions at a cellular level, it just blows your mind. So I'm a bit of a nerd from that perspective. I really love the science, and that opened up a whole new world to me. I was very lucky to have a few really good professors and mentors that shaped more of my sort of academic career. But even through all of this time, I've always been a really big pursuer of self-development and excellence overall. And initially, that did start very much in sports and those types of things, but it grew to be much broader, having more breadth and depth as far as how I approach that. And so that also came into mindfulness, meditation, and those types of practices beyond just the physical side of things. And so now I've really, just over the years, melded all of those together. And you mentioned performance and what that means, and it sounds very sporty, but for me, and I think for a lot of people now in this space, performance is both mental performance, cognitive performance, mindset, as well as the physical. And so you can't really have one without the other. And so that opened up just more and more of wanting to learn and grow and just get as much as I can. And after my undergraduate, I made the decision to go into physiotherapy, just given my background in sport and things like that. So I was very interested in the physical side. But even during that process, I was doing sort of training outside of school in nutrition, functional medicine, natural medicine, lots of courses, lots of different things, kind of always trying to learn and grow, doing my own research. And I started working with people as well. I had the sort of natural, growth into personal training, nutrition coaching, consultations, that sort of thing. And eventually that got into clinical practice once I came out of physiotherapy. But I approached it in a very different way, taking all of my previous learnings and all the training and everything that I've done to view the body and I guess treatment in a very different paradigm. And a lot of what I borrowed from is that sort of functional medicine, evolutionary medicine philosophy. So I looked at the body as a whole. And it's one thing that I find a lot of clinicians and doctors and things sometimes miss the forest for the trees, right? They become very reductionist and we get stuck in these silos. So I approach it very differently, looking at the body holistically and trying to understand, what are all the various mediators, antecedents, all the different things from lifestyle that influence someone's life, their presentation, and all of those things. But then to not just stop from that perspective of, treating someone, which is great. We want to help someone come out of wherever they are, but then thinking about the journey beyond that and starting to think about how do we improve and optimize health? How do we focus on preventative-based health? And how do we start to get that person to open up their world lens towards, bigger and better things beyond just getting out of pain or treating whatever underlying condition they have. So that's a bit of my overarching paradigm and how I work and how that's evolved over time.
Yeah. Did I see that you were in the military for a while too?
Yeah. Yes, I was. I've had I guess due to the mindset of self excellence and trying to always grow and challenge myself, I always put myself in challenging scenarios. And one of the big things was for me growing up, I always viewed the military as sort of the top level of a bit of a challenge. And I grew up in a somewhat military family. Both my father, my stepfather, my grandfather were all in the military as well. So I kind of always had these stories, and I decided to jump in against the will of my mom, probably. But I did join the military just in the reserve because I was studying and doing other things outside of that. But it was a great opportunity to learn and grow and to challenge myself in ways that most people probably would never experience. But I firmly believe that challenging yourself physically is one of the best ways to actually improve and create resilience mentally. Because if you can persevere through pain and soreness and fatigue, it sort of teaches you and gives you a mindset that you just become much more robust across all aspects of your life. And so that was definitely one of the nice things I took away from it.
And did you study at the university when you started doing pre-med before you decided to do physiotherapy? Did you study anthropology? Because your love is ancestral practices and the history of the human way of living. So did you study anthropology, or what did you study that got you so excited about these ancestral principles?
Yeah, I didn't formally study anthropology or paleoanthropology. I actually, and I guess I missed this in my own journey. So through all this pursuit of trying to improve and optimize and training in sports, I was also competing in martial arts and in kickboxing for a period of time. I was the typical type A overachiever and pretty much just burned myself out, and inevitably came to find that I was starting to get a lot of symptoms. So initially joint aches, tired, fatigue, a lot of gut dysfunction, so sort of classical presentation of IBS, IBSD, which never really got resolved. And I went through the traditional conventional approach. Doctor didn't really help much, dietitian didn't really help much. And so I had to sort of figure things out on my own. And obviously this was my passion, so I figured I could figure it out. And I was very thankful in the very, very early days to come across Lauren Cordain and Rob Wolf and the paleo diet. And so that was probably my foray into the ancestral health movement. And this was just when the book really had come out. So I've been following that ancestral sort of evolutionary model for quite some time. I was hopeful that the world would move in that direction, but we can talk about that. And so that was probably the first book that opened my mind to this, anthropological, paleoanthropological approach to looking at health, which sort of evolved more into the very specific evolutionary model. And that piqued a lot of my interest, and it just made sense to me as well, just from common sense perspective and simple logic. It made sense that, we've been on the planet for, depending on what ancestor you want to look back to, let's say 2 million years, and we've evolved over time. And it would make sense that our biology and physiology has been shaped through that evolution. And so if we want to improve our own health, we sort of need to view things from that lens. And so that kind of opened up a big rabbit hole for me. And I read all the books kind of in that space And I actually found anthropology just very interesting and exciting. I wanted to learn more about our history, our evolution, and our past. And so that kind of what led to that whole realm.
Yeah, it does make sense, but it's quite interesting that if we look at the practice of medicine and the foods and if the food culture, lifestyle, and everything, when we start to look at all of that, we realize that they're not even following that model. They've got ultra processed foods. Like if you go to a hospital, you're given ultra processed food, custard without eggs. You're given potatoes that are from powder. You're given eggs that are from powder. Like it's just disgraceful what is happening. And then you're in a room with bright lights. You're not allowed outside to the sunshine. And it's just, to me, we have missed the boat when it comes to trying to heal people. And like you said, this makes sense. Whereas to me, what that model is doing, it's good in emergencies. But when it comes to chronic disease, I think sitting in a hospital bed for a long period of time is going to make you sicker and sicker and sicker because of the lights, the food, and everything else that happens within that hospital system, the radiations. I was looking at a hospital the other day, and they had these huge, I think it was 5G towers on top of the hospital. Thinking, what is that EMF exposure doing to everybody who's trying to get well or start to heal in there? What is that doing to it? So, yeah, my eyes are opened wide when it comes to that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. It does seem to be somewhat of a blind spot in traditional conventional medicine. I think it's just a different paradigm. Like a lot of modern medicine was developed around acute infectious disease and to treat that sort of thing. So one ill, one pill is the sort of general motto. But as you said, chronic disease is multi-system, it's complicated, it's complex. And so it doesn't really respond to this very reductionist sort of approach. And yeah, I think we need to start shifting towards more of that functional medicine model, evolutionary medicine model, at least for the chronic disease side of things, even from, preventative health, that would do a lot to help people. And even in acute care, we have very good data on how aligning certain things like that, like I said, natural light, fresh air, all of those types of things. Even there's been studies where just having pictures of nature in the hospital seems to increase the speed at which people can recuperate from illness and from operations. So, it seems like it's a minor thing that doesn't matter much, but when you look at the research, it actually can drastically shape someone's health.
Yeah, and yet they're not doing it, which is sad. So from physiotherapy, which is that you don't ever, there's no talk of this type of thing. So from physiotherapy, reading the books and doing what you're doing, how do you integrate physiotherapy and this type of ancestral health into your practice? I guess you're practicing, aren't you? Yeah,
I am. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And the second part of that question is, who wants to change?
Change is difficult, right?
Yes. Yeah. And how do you even, because if you've got somebody that's come in, they're from the medical model, they've come in to have rehab, let's say. I don't know what physiotherapy you do, but let's just say they've come in for a specific reason, and you've kind of gone, well, I think you should change your diet and you think you should change your lifestyle. And this is the way I think you should do it. I think you should go off margarine and ultra-processed foods, and if you're vegan, off those plastic meats and those milks and things like that. And this is what I'm finding is that people would rather die than change.
Yeah, sadly true.
Change. So give me what you are doing to change people.
So this is the, I think, toughest question, at least in the chronic disease management space. And really that applies pretty much to all of medicine now, because that's really what we're dealing with as far as an epidemic around the Western world, at least. I think for me, the way I view things is probably more from a coaching perspective. And I've done various courses on health coaching, which has probably given me the tools to better approach that, because a lot of clinicians, perhaps at least in traditional academia, don't get a lot of those skills on how to coach and guide someone through behavior change. And that's really the core thing that we need to be focusing on. Everyone knows what to do, right? Everyone knows smoking is bad, drinking is bad, don't eat a bunch of sugar, right? Everyone knows those general principles, but we don't do it. And most people don't do it. And it's because it's a much deeper layer that we need to go down into. And there are, of course, other sort of confounding variables. Socioeconomic status, we know, plays a big role. Someone has 4 kids, works 2 jobs, they're a single parent, they may not have time to address certain things. So you have to you have to spend a lot of time with that person, getting to know them, understand what the aspects affecting them and their lifestyle are, and then slowly work on changing habits over time. So it's not an overnight process. And I think often in clinic, a lot of clinicians are sort of trained by just the science. It's like, all right, we know the science is this, so do this. And that's about all you get. But we really need to sort of guide and hold people's hands through that process. And that looks different for everyone. So, we have, what is it in psychology? The readiness for change scale. And so some people are, in that contemplation state, and others are in pre-contemplation, or they're not even aware they have an issue. And so we need to figure out where people are and meet them at that stage, and then be able to guide them through that process with small changes. And we also have to show that we care, and that's a big part of it. And traditional clinical practice can be somewhat sterile, let's say. We've somewhat lost that connection and the art of practice. And so I think we need more of that. And I'm actually a really big fan of incorporating health coaches into practices. I know in America and North America, they're doing this more and more. And in fact, they actually now are covered under insurance. But Australia is lagging a little bit with that. I think they can be a core part of sort of the medical allied health team, because they're specialists in how to get behavior change and how to build habits. And I feel that's probably the missing part.
Mm.
I would just love to ask here about the mindset. Sorry, Cyndi, but I was
just going to say what you talk about for people to change, and I'd like you to address it with regards to what their highest value is.
Yeah, we know that a lot of people won't change if it doesn't align with their highest values, as Cyndi just said. And so people might think that health is their highest value, but in fact, connection or social connection could be, which is why they'd prefer a wine and having drinks with friends rather than going for a walk and getting out into nature. Yeah. How do you see, from an anthropological evolutionary standpoint, and how we basically didn't have time to think when you look, it was about survival and thriving, this whole generation, if you like, we are putting so much effort and thought and process into the way we think that it's almost like we're getting paralysis by analysis. Is that your understanding, that people are kind of starting to think that maybe we're going too far another way now into mindset? You said something at the beginning, which was, if we can get our physical health right, it actually creates resilience and robustness. And this is something that I'm really curious to hear more about, because the physical body is the one thing we have. We can change a mindset, but we don't get to really change the physiological makeup of who we are. We can change the behavior, but we only get one heart, one lungs, one set of kidneys. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I spend quite a bit of time these days thinking about that, particularly, I guess, from a cultural, societal perspective now, because I do feel we're maybe swinging a bit too far in one direction. And this is my own view, and there is some evidence to support, but I think we've moved away from the resilience mindset and building robustness to maybe an over-focus on, trauma, over-medicalization as well, as a big problem. And instead of trying to support people and build them up, we're sort of bubble wrapping a lot of people. And so we do have a bit of this culture now of safetyism, which has happened. And that comes from, very early on. So kids now across many spectrums also just don't have many challenges. I think it's one of the benefits of living in a sort of civilized Western modern world that we don't have to worry about famine and war and disease and these types of things, which is great. But it also means we're very sheltered. And so we don't go through hardships. And those lack of hardships is creating perhaps a lack of purpose and meaning. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Viktor Frankl and logos therapy, right? And so I think that's a big problem. They call it anomie in philosophy. So anomie is sort of loss of purpose, loss of meaning. And I think that's affecting a lot of people. And so we try to seek it in other behaviors. Often that will lead to, the typical sort of hedonic behaviors that are maybe not pro-health. And so I think it's important to try to find what every individual's values and virtues are, and their specific goals, and then try to find, how do we align their lifestyle with those types of things. And you're very right. For a lot of people, sometimes it's the hard conversation of, you say your health is, 10 out of 10, but your actions are showing your health is a 5 out of 10. And so where's the discrepancy? And sometimes people need to have that recognition and awareness that there is that discordance. And it can be very, very uncomfortable for people. And again, I think that's where more the mindset and coaching perspective can help, because if you can crack that, then it becomes much easier to actually do the things that will align with it. What's the saying? A man who has a why can withstand any how. So that, I think, is a very powerful statement. And I think that holds true for a lot of people.
You think, though, from a mindset perspective, there seems to be, and I completely agree with you, and I'm sure Cyndi does as well, the softness. It's almost like the baby boomers came through such a hard time. They wanted to make it right for their kids. And now, almost with respect to anyone listening, and this is a generalized statement, there's an air or sense of entitlement that everybody should get what they want and how they want it, and they deserve it, and we don't have to work hard. And this softness, I heard a speaker not long ago talking about that challenges become calluses for the mind. So if we're going to the gym and we're doing pull-ups, at first we're going to get calluses and it hurts and we get blisters. But the more we do it and push ourselves, the more those calluses actually become protection measures for when we do more and more. How would you suggest we callous the mind or become more okay with challenge? Like, challenge isn't a bad thing.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to broach that initially is through physical practice. So personally, I think that's the easiest foray into that realm. And whether that's through training or doing difficult things and making it perhaps more specific to the individual. So that doesn't mean going in the gym and necessarily doing squats and deadlifts. It could be going for difficult hikes. It could be swimming intensely, trying to find something where you're pushing yourself a little bit. Sport can be good for that. But even, and I think this is one of the main benefits of doing things like ice baths or sauna therapy, right? Because the aspect of it is it's going to be uncomfortable, right? But you do it anyway. And then you come out of that being like, I did that. I feel great. This is so good. I can now attack other things that might be difficult in my life because I know it will be temporary. It'll suck, but I'll come out of it feeling fine and I'll often be better for it. So I do think those tools are really useful, at least in the sort of beginning and short term, to just get people used to discomfort. And then there's a deeper layer of just a mindset shift, right? Of learning to be comfortable being uncomfortable and somewhat starting to enjoy that without being masochistic, because it can go too far, right? There's the David Goggins of the world and things like that, which perhaps that's a little bit too far in the extreme. But there's a happy medium of regularly trying to put yourself in uncomfortable situations so that you become more used to that and you build that sort of callus, as it were. Really good book. And I think you probably asked me about books. This is one of my top favorites, is the Comfort Crisis, which really outlines this whole issue, right? Of how as a society, we just no longer really have to struggle. Like, you can literally sit on your couch all day without having to get up. You can order Uber, got your TV, you can work from home. You pretty much don't have to do anything anymore where you get uncomfortable. We're in air conditioning and all of those. So we're just not adapted to those types of stimulus anymore. And so we need to start to use types of environmental mimetics or different things that give us that stimulus to build that callus.
And if we look at our ancestral beginnings and origins and how we've lived, we always lived in some sort of uncomfortable situation, whether it was being part of a predator chasing us or us chasing something, or we needed food or shelter, or there was snow or there was rain, and we went through the extremes of, cold to hot. It's really interesting. I've been in South America, and I was down at Ushuaia, which is the southern tip of South America. And there's a group of people down there called the Yamanan. And they are hunters of the sea as well as birds. The only plants that they would get would be a few berries during the summer months. But for the most part, they lived on the sea in these huge boats that they'd dug out. They'd even have fires in these boats. They didn't wear clothes.
Yep.
They were naked, and the only thing that they used was seal blubber, basically, that they would rub on their skin in the colder months. And the temperature in Ushuaia, because of where it is, the summer months are about 10 degrees and the winters are about 5. So there wasn't there are some minus temperatures that are there, but you think about their resilience and their incredible way of living. And yeah, you would see them in a boat. Like, the boats were really high. They were just short, by the way. They were 155 to 165 centimeters. But they just didn't have any clothes on, like nothing.
Yeah. And that's just that's what it was.
They didn't even put if they had a deer or something down there, they didn't use anything. I was absolutely floored by them. I'd never heard of them before, and I love cultures, and that culture really blew my mind.
Yeah, amazing. I've not heard of them either. It sounds fascinating, and it's one of the amazing things about humans. Not to be human-centric, but like we've literally spread around the globe in all sorts of climates. You look at the Inuit in northern Canada, like they're surviving in -40, -50 degree temperatures. It's phenomenal. And yeah, we just don't really have those types of stimuli anymore. That's the funny thing with biohacking. I think a lot of people are into that space now, but a lot of at least some of the basic biohacking is really just environmental mimetics, right? It's trying to stimulate ourselves in a way that we naturally would have. So we use heat therapy because we don't get hot. We're not hunting out in the sun anymore. We use cold because we're not in the cold anymore. Even red light therapy, it's really, we can get full spectrum light from the sun. Infrared, we get infrared from the sun. So we're really trying to, I guess, reestablish some of these natural environmental stimuli through tools that we have in modern technology, which is great because we do live in a very modernized society now where it's somewhat difficult for some people to get these exposures naturally. But it's just funny how that paradigm shifts that way.
It is funny because they're expensive. So you get yourself an ice bath, you've got to run it, use electricity. You get yourself an infrared spa and a sauna, or an infrared sauna, and then you get yourself a heat sauna. And you've got to run all these things. It's expensive. And then I'm like going, well, just go out in the sun, put a backpack on your bike, on your back, go hiking, get up, watch the sunrise. They're free.
Exactly.
And I think we've just gotten, and everyone goes, oh, I'm getting an infrared this, and I'm getting an ice bath, and we're doing that. Like, I have to tell you, when I was in Ushuaia, we went to the Antarctic and we could do a polar plunge. It was 1.5 degrees. And I went, yeah, I'm in,
Yeah.
And I did. I did the polar plunge, as did my husband, and did 83 other people on the boat that we were on.
Amazing.
There were 130 of us on the boat. So, and quite a few of the staff decided to do it as well. But to me, I may not be able to get that temperature in the ocean because our ocean at the moment is 26 degrees, as you live in Brisbane and we live just an hour north of you. But I can go in the middle of winter, an hour west of here, and go to Balumba and jump into a very cold creek. So I'm with you. I think we need these exposures. I think we need these because if we look at ancestral living, we have to live like our ancestors because we have this evolutionary body, and the extremes were all part of it. The cold, the heat, the, like being in the sunshine, like the sleep patterns, everything is what we have to look at. And I'll assume by what I've read about you and everything that, you stand for, is that's what we're trying to do for our clients. And they're not hard things to do. But saying that, I go to the beach every single day, and there's 350,000 people on the coast. And let's just say there's 15,000 in Mooloolaba. And so I go to Mooloolaba Beach. And there's probably, I don't know, maybe a couple hundred to 1,000 people at that beach every single morning. And I swim with a group of people. And I kind of go, you live a block away. You could get up and you could do that. But what's happening is, like what you were saying, we can stay at home and in the comfort of our own place and not have air conditioning or heating or have Uber. And it's if people could get this, I think our chronic disease would be far less.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just, we need more people out there like you. Like every practitioner should be like you, in my way of thinking.
I agree. And it's something that I preached when I was running a previous wellness clinic. Sort of all of the clinicians that I would hire, I made sure to stress that as well. And it's a mindset shift, right? We need to start thinking broader. So even in conventional medicine, in medicine overall, it's very focused on the treatment and that's it. But we need to start thinking prevention and preventative-based care. And so when you view the world from that lens, you start to think about all the other factors that are influencing people's health. And then how do we prevent them from coming back is really what the ultimate goal should be, right? They shouldn't need hospitals. We shouldn't need to be seeing the doctor all the time. There's always going to be scenarios where, yes, we do need that. But I think if we can start to think about things from that perspective, then even from a research perspective, it's very obvious what we need to focus on. In my field, particularly even just with, say, injuries, right? As simple as looking at someone's psychosocial stress. We know that stress drastically affects the body's ability to heal and regenerate, right? So if someone has chronic ongoing stress, they've got anxiety and depression, they've got dissatisfaction with their job, all of those things, and you're simply just trying to treat their tissue, but you're not addressing all of these other factors, you're completely missing the mark on how you're actually going to help that individual, right? So we do need to start thinking more holistically across all the sort of practices and modalities within medicine.
You both talk a lot about chronic disease, and I understand that that's an issue in today's world and the way we live. And it's certainly limiting our lifespan, as you say, and health span. What about pain? There seems to be a lot more pain in the world, not just emotional and heartache and depression and all those things you were just talking about, but a lot of people are inflamed. A lot of people have got chronic issues or injuries that just don't seem to heal. Is it the same approach you use? Because I hear a lot about the pain loop. Is it the same thing that we're talking about with you being a physio? How do you approach chronic pain?
Yeah, chronic pain is a very interesting area. And that was probably a lot of what I focused on early on, because due to the nature of my sort of continuing training, I would often see more complicated and complex cases. And so there's a whole area that I focus in there. We're learning more about pain now. So pain often is very subjective. So, we don't have pain receptors per se. We have what are called nociceptors, and they detect stimuli. And that stimuli is sent to the brain, and the brain then sends out a signal to your consciousness of whether or not that should be a threat or whether or not we should perceive some type of pain. So this is what makes pain very complicated, because there is very much a neurological perspective to it, and that it is, to put simply, sort of created and manifested by the brain, which means anything in that person's life can affect that. The other aspect that often goes missed is what you said. So this sort of chronic inflammatory state that so many people are in. So most people now, just due to the lifestyle we have, particularly due to the foods and the toxins that we have in our environment, we have this sort of chronic low-level toxicity or inflammation occurring in a vast majority of people, which makes it very difficult, A, for your body to heal and recuperate, but B, also then sensitizes those nociceptors or exacerbates the central nervous system to have sort of a lower threshold for pain perception. And so that's probably one of the big issues of why we see so much chronic pain now. It generally, based on a lot of the research, at least for the more chronic types of things now, is not very musculoskeletal in and of itself. For example, chronic low back pain or non-specific chronic low back pain is probably one of the biggest factors of people visiting their doctor. And it's one of the largest costs to healthcare now, just this one simple thing. But what a lot of the research shows is it's not really biomechanical and it's not really musculoskeletal. It's usually more something else. So psychosocial or some other perspective of their lifestyle, creating this sort of persistent pain loop within the system. And that's where personalization has to come in. So the whole realm of personalized medicine, I think, is still a bit slow on its uptake. And that's probably because, at a large scale public health perspective, that's just not realistic. You can't do that in public health, not yet, at least. Maybe with AI, we can start to do that. And there's early discussions there. But you have to be able to figure out what is the root cause for that individual and then address that specifically for them. And everyone's going to be different, right? For some people, it might be the stress, like I said. For others, it might be excessive alcohol consumption and depression. For others, it might be something else. So we have to figure out specifically for them, what's the issue, and then go through that health coaching mindset perspective of how do we then engage in healthier lifestyle behaviors to get them out of that loop.
You're saying that it's an individual thing, pain is individual, but is a pain an indicator to the body that something is wrong? So, and if you do not have that pain, then you don't, there's like, that's what I've always thought of pain like that. I've never thought about it being an individual thing, and that everybody feels it differently. I just kind of go, well, if there's a pain, a headache or gut pain or arm pain or hip pain, there's a reason. And that pain is there to give you that reason. And I know that what medicine does, and I think they've got those 10 steps, and one of them is pain. What's your pain? 0 to 10. And if it's high, they give you a drug. But then the drug takes the pain away, and then you might go do something that you shouldn't be doing. So that's the way I've always thought about pain. Yeah.
Yeah, and traditionally that's what most people think about pain. And this is what we're learning over the last 20 years. There's a difference between acute pain and persistent pain. And so with acute pain, that very much holds true. So usually it's a signal that something is wrong, something is off, we need to pay attention. You know, the body's trying to yell at you like, hey, start to focus on this, and maybe we need to do something. The issue with chronic pain or persistent pain is after 3 months, what happens is we actually see changes in the central nervous system. So there are physical changes that occur in the brain and throughout the spinal cord that then change your pain perception thresholds. So now you could actually not have any sort of noxious stimuli, but the brain thinks it's still there. So you may have had, say, a shoulder injury, it was there for a while, but the tissue has recovered and healed, and there's no physical injury anymore, but the brain is still perceiving it. And so that's what makes it very difficult. The classical sort of example of this, I'm going to forget the name now, phantom limb pain, right? So that's where someone has had an amputation, say they've had an amputation of their arm, but they still feel pain in their arm, which is impossible, right? Because they don't have that limb anymore, but they still feel pain there. And that is entirely a presentation of the brain. And so that's what makes the whole pain space very, very difficult, both from a clinical perspective. And I think there's a philosophy aspect to it too, even from the uncomfortable state. And this is something I think of quite a bit these days, where I think we don't have that callous, I suppose, even from a pain perspective. Like, I think a lot of people now just assume we're supposed to be 100% pain-free, which isn't always the case. Like, we're always going to have niggles. We're always potentially going to have a few little things. We should still feel good and feel optimal. We shouldn't be dealing with significant issues. But I think there is an aspect where some of the things now perhaps become more serious, or in their mind are perceived as more serious. And so they become hypervigilant about it. And that can actually make it much worse. It's very tricky because it is a happy medium. It's this teeter of trying to get people to feel acceptance and commitment about where they're at, but also at the same time, we don't want to accept, or at least from my perspective, I don't want people to accept, quote unquote, being normal, right? Because we should all be optimal and we should be thriving and we should have ideal health, not kind of suboptimal health.
I love this because so many people talk about not only pains of life, but their physical pains. And it's the one thing that limits or has people fear doing things. And for a lot of people, they think that pain is a natural artifact of getting older, that it's expected, that we should be on medications, it's just the way the society is driven. Can we give a plug about your clinic, your work, and then how you'd approach, because I'm sure people listening to this will know people in pain. Let's face it, most people suffer pain in some way or another. Can you tell us what you offer and what your whole perspective is when someone arrives? What's your dream for them when they finish with you or leave with you?
Great question. So my practice now has moved 100% virtual. So I'm no longer doing sort of hands-on brick and mortar. And a lot of that is because over time, I've been working with more of these sort of complicated issues. That's one spectrum of what I do. And I have particular areas. So complex chronic pain. I see a lot of chronic fatigue associated with that now as well, sort of fibromyalgia-like presentations, autoimmune conditions. I do have myself an autoimmune condition that I developed over time. And I've always had sort of atopic issues. So I've got a particular focus on that and gastrointestinal health because that correlates to so many other symptoms. So a lot of people are unaware that even, let's use gluten as an example, one of the what are called extraintestinal manifestations of celiac or gluten intolerance is musculoskeletal pains and symptoms. So joint aches, joint pains, even brain fog, those types of things. So I look at that spectrum quite deeply because nowadays in the modern world, most people have a disrupted gut of some sort. So those are some of the core areas I focus in from a treatment perspective. But the other part of what I do and what I'm really passionate about now is more health coaching and working with people, health and performance coaching, working on health optimization, longevity, performance, and those types of things, and getting people to start optimizing their health and starting to view things from a preventative-based care model. So I can be somewhat of a sounding board for people, often in conjunction with their GPs and other practitioners. But, what are the things that we want to look for? What are some of the things we should be screening for? How do we make sure, any of your potential family history is relevant that we want to be mindful of? But then what do we work towards bigger, better goals, right? I like the idea of think big. So a lot of people, they get sort of stuck in thinking small, but that's often a result of being stuck in this pain cycle or dealing with whatever chronic condition. So the ultimate sort of journey for me in working with individuals is moving them from that mindset where they're stuck in this sort of cycle of chronic ongoing conditions. They can't start to think about, self-actualization. If you think Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like that's very low because they're stuck in this cycle. But then ideally we can get them out of that state and then start to change the mindset towards, all right, well, what are your goals? What do you want to achieve? Do you want to be here for your grandkids or your great grandkids? Do you want to be able to play sports with them as you get older? What are the things that you want to do that are relevant to you? And some people they're also athletic. So, I've got quite a few people now who want to run an ultra marathon, and they went from dealing with chronic fatigue to great, let's do an ultra now, right? So I think that's the ultimate journey that I like to see people move from. It's out of that sort of chronic state and moving into this bigger unlocked potential sort of ideal of what they can achieve and maintaining that throughout their life. So the idea of health span versus just lifespan. And I know longevity is very popular now, but a lot of people don't think about the health span perspective. And for people who are maybe not familiar with the term, health span is sort of the maintenance of your health while you age. So what is your actual capacity and function as you get older? Because you can live longer, and medicine is great at keeping people alive nowadays, but you might be bedridden for 20 years. And so that's not really an ideal state to live in towards the end of your life. Ideally, you should be still mobile and running around and being able to do things as you get older. And so that's a lot of what I really focus on now. And I'm very passionate about that space. And somewhat for myself too. Like I want to make sure I have a good, long, healthy life and that I'm here for a long time. So I kind of spend a lot of time digging into that space.
Do you find that in a general rule, not in an individual rule, but when you consult with somebody, there are the basics that you have to get done rather than, this person has no thyroid and therefore they have to take meds for the rest of their life and their weight's oscillating, and this person's got diverticulitis or this person's got chronic back pain or whatever it is that we might present with. Do you find that there is the general rules of things that they have to do? Like it's not individual. Everybody's got to do it. And if that is the case, what is your non-negotiables with everybody that they must do, not in a specific way, but in a generalized way?
Yeah, that's fantastic. And that's a lot of what I do spend my time doing. Us here, we're sort of in the health and wellness space. So a lot of the things that we assume are common knowledge actually really aren't for a lot of people. So I do have my own framework, which is called the Evolved Health method, which is based on that evolutionary model that looks at sort of my ideal core pillars of health. So that's mindset, environment, sleep, stress, nutrition, movement. And then the icing on the top of the cake is biohacking when we want to throw that in there. But the foundations are those core principles. And so I somewhat have non-negotiables within each of those. And a bit of a plug, I will have a course coming out, which will be my foundations course that covers sort of end-to-end all of the things that I recommend from a foundations perspective. I actually have that course for the clients that I work with. So when they're on a program with me, they'll also have that foundations course to go through. So it teaches them the basics and some of the underlying science and background as we're sort of working through them together. And I find that just helps them understand a lot more. And that way they can apply it a lot more effectively. So through each of those, if I want to just call out a few key areas, mindset really, I actually encompass my entire framework within mindset or really sort of psychosocial, spiritual health, because that's a big factor that if that's not right, it doesn't matter what you do often in the other areas. So if you don't have a good mindset, if you don't have sort of a psychological or spiritual well-being, it becomes very difficult to do anything, right? Like it's a major barrier for people. So from that perspective, a lot of the ideas of growth mindset and trying to reframe things in the world in a growth mindset perspective is what I try to work on. But the other big component of that, and then from a sort of evolutionary ancestral approach, is community and connection, right? So making sure you have some type of social group outside of work, let's say, or at least you're engaging with some type of social group. Family, that's great. Some people, maybe their family's not been the best, so they need to find something outside of that. But We know that social isolation is one of the biggest risk factors for pretty much all-cause mortality. There's been some research to compare it even to smoking, or worse than smoking. So making sure that you have some type of community, find your tribe, as it were, so that you can feel that you're a part of something more than just yourself. That's sort of that key aspect within the mindset framework. Environment can get really convoluted, but it's trying to minimize exposure to toxins wherever possible. The low-hanging fruit really there is particularly sort of plastics pollution as much as we can. So, in the house, having either your windows open or try to live somewhere more green if you can, using an air purifier, those types of things. But I think a lot of people underappreciate how much our environment is full of toxins these days, and we're learning more about plastics and those. Sleep, there's sort of the general sleep hygiene. I'll reference Max Goldhain, who's sort of, the whiz in this space nowadays of making sure we're getting light exposure and we're sort of building our natural circadian rhythm, which would have been part of our natural ancestral approach. From a stress perspective, engaging in some type of stress reduction practice, whether it's meditation, mindfulness, time in nature. It could even be, go get a massage or go to the spa for some people. That's the thing that's going to help them sort of unwind. Stress, nutrition, obviously being sort of ancestrally minded, I try to follow the ancestral principles. So predominantly somewhat animal-based, anti-inflammatory, paleo-like diet to try to avoid the types of things from the Neolithic period, predominantly grains, legumes, processed, ultra-processed foods, those types of things, and focus on nutrient density, mostly through animal-based nutrition. And then movement, again, you can add a lot of things in, but I think the main thing is trying to avoid being sedentary and just move as much as possible. That's the easiest thing to start with, because we know being sedentary is a major risk factor for lots of different things. So just trying to find ways to get more steps in and trying to move more and more throughout the day.
Now, you talked about animal-based nutrition. So is that in a supplement form, or are you talking carnivore, or where do you lay on there? I heard you talk about Max, who's, he's with Anthony Chaffee, and Anthony Chaffee is seems to be
the carnivore guy
king at the moment
yeah.
in Australia.
I would say I try not to be dogmatic in the way that I view nutrition. I use ancestral principles as an overarching paradigm, but I'm not beholden to it in any way. That's sort of religious belief, right? So I try to find what works for that individual. So in a perfect state, I would start most people paleo to try to eliminate at least grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, maybe, depending on the presentation, and then just see how they respond. But it's going to be different for everyone. So I'm a fan of carnivore in certain instances. It's keto, so we know that keto has a lot of benefits from a metabolic health perspective. The anecdotes in autoimmune conditions are really interesting. Still no hard evidence yet, so we have to be mindful. But I've used it in a lot of my autoimmune patients and seen quite good results. I did a stint of it myself. So it's flexible, I would say. However, I do lean more towards the animal-based view of things, where the core focus of nutrition likely should be animal-based foods, meaning high protein, high fat, and animal sourced, just due to the fact that, rich in all our B vitamins, iron, all our healthy fats, all of those things that we need for optimal nutrition, and to be quite frank, to not die, versus, say, a more plant-based approach, which for a lot of people can be problematic. And the degree to which it's problematic, I think, is debatable. But yeah, I would certainly lean more towards an ancestral animal-based like diet.
But I'm curious on this then, because for many people, there's a lot of vegans or vegetarians, and with respect, I appreciate their values around this, around animal welfare and the way animals are farmed and treated and inoculated, and they don't have happy lives. And they say we are what we eat eats. And so I'm just curious from that perspective then, if we all get on this bandwagon, is there enough meat in your belief system? Is there enough for everybody? How would it be if we all went this way? Because many people would say, look at a gorilla, it only eats vegetables and plants. I've seen all these things.
Yeah.
I'd just love to know your thoughts around that.
Yeah, I get the gorilla thing. Often you'll see like a meme or something pop up on social media. Unfortunately, it just points to that person's lack of understanding of physiology. So we're still a primate, and yes, gorillas are primate, but their digestive system evolved very differently. So they have an extraordinarily large colon, whereas we don't anymore. We've focused more on building our brain so that we don't have to spend hours and hours digesting cellulose and fibers and things like that. So our digestive system has evolved completely differently. We're actually more in line with, say, a carnivore or something that sort of just picks up leftovers and gets what was left over. So we're actually more in line with a higher protein type of diet based on our physiology, our digestive physiology. So I'll kind of just outline that from that perspective. From an overarching ethical view, I agree, and that's where I often align with a lot of plant-based advocates. There is the issue of sort of our conventional agriculture and how it's done, which is very problematic, both from an ethical perspective, but from an environmental perspective. And so this is where I'm very passionate about the regenerative agriculture side, which I know both of you are as well, and many of the community now here very much is involved with. And so I think that's really the only long-term solution. And the values often overlap quite a bit. If you were to have a Venn diagram of plant-based and carnivore, from a sustainability perspective, a lot of the things overlap quite a bit, in that we're trying to increase welfare of animals. We're trying to increase sustainability and regrowth of sort of ecosystems and biodiversity. The issue, I think, from my perspective and some of the research and things I follow, similar to Max and many of the other people in the space, is that the plant-based approach is not actually a net positive. It's actually worse for the environment. So it relies on monocrop agriculture, which we know devastates the soil and devastates biodiversity and ecosystems. And people tend not to think about the sort of secondary and tertiary effects of that type of agriculture. So because a cow doesn't die, they think nothing has died. But in fact, actually, we've killed all the insects. We've killed all the pests and the birds to make sure they don't eat the crops. And so if we're thinking about least harm done, often these monocrop agriculture perspectives often cause more damage. That's not even considering sort of microbes, the soil, and all of that, which now we know we're depleting our topsoil. There's only, in some areas now, a few harvests left of topsoil. In other areas, we've already had desertification because of monocrop agriculture and poor land management. And so if we're thinking, what is the most sustainable way to eat long-term? I think regenerative agriculture is the only option at the moment, which really realigns how we grow our food from an agriculture perspective. The question still remains then, like you said, if everyone shifted to this way of eating, can we produce enough? I don't know. I'm not sure. There are many people now, I guess, looking at that and seeing if it is sustainable. I'm hopeful. I think it is. If we look at, say, the Americas, we had millions and millions and millions of bison that went through those plains prior. And unfortunately, they got wiped out. And so if we equate what used to be there to what we have now in agriculture, I think there's still room to grow without having undue negative consequences on the environment and still being able to supply a nutrient-dense diet for the population. So I'm hopeful. I think we can get there. It will be a bit of a mindset shift. But from a nutrition perspective, I just don't see, at least 100% plant-based, I don't see how that would work long-term. We know that there's going to be nutrient deficiencies. B12 and iron are obvious for most people. But maybe, if people want to do flexitarian, I certainly support that. But I think we need to have this larger education component around agriculture and regenerative agriculture, because we become so disconnected from where our food actually comes from, at least for most of us now living in sort of a metropolis where the nearest farm is a 2-3+ hour drive, and they've never actually seen what goes into actually raising animals and actually running a farm. They just see this food show up on their plate or in the grocery store, and they think, yeah, great, magically it just shows up. So I think we need to have a better connection and understanding to where our food comes from. And so I'm very passionate about that regenerative agriculture space and nutrition. That's why I have my other company, Vital Origin, which provides some of those nutrient-dense foods, particularly freeze-dried organ capsules. And because we know that as far as calorie per calorie nutrient density, those are some of the best, but people don't really consume them much because this is a palatability issue, as well as things like beef tallow and things there. So I definitely think we can move in that direction.
I think too, we have to understand the spiritual side of this, that I don't know if the universe or the world or people would ever all be on one page all together. And in a way, that's what creates your work, Cyndi's work, my work, because there's a lot of people who don't. And I guess also embracing and acknowledging that not everybody's at the same level of education or desire or want to learn all of this information. It is what drives people like all of us, I would imagine, to keep making the world a better place if we can. What would you say to I guess the people that are listening to this podcast? We're not converting them. They're already interested. They're going to love you no matter what because we love you. So it's kind of like, how do we create the ripple effect or the beautiful, I guess, the effect where the law of precession, where we actually create our own best selves and then lead by example. Is that something that you would recommend?
Absolutely. Yeah. 100% on board from that. I think this is one of the things within, say, the culture wars, for lack of a better word, where I guess there's the paradigm of trying to change things at scale at a big level versus focusing at a more local level and starting with the individual. I'm a big fan of sort of a decentralized approach to health and well-being and agriculture, and starting from smaller local communities. And that starts with you first and foremost. And like you said, leading by example. And just having conversations with people and just talking to people about your views and your perspectives, but doing it in a way where you're understanding and compassionate and empathetic to other people's perspectives and views. And I think this is particularly in this day and age, there's a lot of divisiveness, which is unfortunate. And there's a lot of sort of just attacks on either side because we become very sort of entrenched and dogmatic in our beliefs and perspectives. I think we need to be more open-minded and more compassionate to different views and just have these discussions and just talk to people. And eventually, I would hope we come to some type of moral high ground where we realize what is the ultimate better sort of state for all of us, and recognizing that that's going to be different for everyone.
We're both stumped, are we, Kim?
Oh, no, I just thought I've been doing a lot of talking.
We've got so many questions.
Well,
I've got some, but I'm going to leave them in private, actually.
Yeah,
Sorry, everybody listening. You're not going to hear it.
I think what I really took away from today, your drive. I've heard Navy SEALs. I've listened to a lot of David Goggins. I've listened to the military and that whole way of being, and I'm absolutely blown away by it. Love the discipline. Love the whole drive to actually create and be the best that we possibly can with that mindset. Again, I know it's not for everybody, but I reckon we could all do with a little bit of that in our lives. And from my understanding, a lot of their philosophy is improvise, adapt, overcome. But I love yours: improve, optimize, prevent. And I think that's a very holistic way of looking. We can improve our health, then optimize who we are, and then create a preventative approach so that we live the rest of our life, as our dear friend Marcus Pierce would say, as the best of our life. Is there a final message to you? Top 3 tips, something or anything that you would love to say to the Up for a Chat listener? They are educated. They are incredible souls. They're always searching, learning, listening, wanting to know more. What would you say to our beautiful listener?
I mean, there's so many avenues could go down from that perspective. Lately, personally, for me, I've been thinking a lot and meditating a lot around philosophy and mindset and those types of things. And I think a lot of people would do themselves well if they spent some time digging into philosophy a little bit more around, say, ethics, virtue ethics, how to be a good person. I think that's something that's missing writ large, pretty much across society, is that pursuit of excellence, as you were saying, and thinking about how to be good, how to be a good person. That will then shape your journey into other areas where you'll take that mindset to be as best as you can in anything else, whatever your pursuit is: business, family, training, etc. So I think first and foremost, that's an opener. Personally, I'm a big fan of Stoicism. That was sort of some of my early introduction into philosophy. So if people want to sort of venture into Stoicism, I think that can work well. It's not for everyone, but that opens up at least the world into other areas where you can start to think about these deeper questions. Or Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, I think is a must read for a lot of people from that perspective. Outside of those, I am a really big fan of, like, what's the low-hanging fruit? What's the thing that's going to give you the most bang for your buck? And I think exercise, we're learning, just ameliorates so many of the negative consequences of bad health choices. And so I think if you can focus on one thing, exercise is going to be very helpful, particularly trying to do things that are very intense. And so a lot of people in the longevity space now are looking at a lot of this research. Rhonda Patrick is a good resource for that, where it's not so much the duration, but the intensity. So even if it's short bouts of activity, it could be 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes every other day, something like that. But if you just do something really intense, the order of magnitude improvement we see on health markers is just so far above and beyond anything else we can do in health, right? And I think a lot of people focus on supplements and hacks and the latest sort of whatever fad is around. But really, at the end of the day, exercise and nutrition really move the needle a lot. And then I guess the other one could be nutrition, but I guess that's a bit bland. A lot of people sort of focus on that perspective, but it does shift our physiology and our health in quite a drastic way. So if you've not, say, had a foray into the ancestral health approach, even just doing 30 days, just give yourself 30 days of doing like a paleo-like diet and see how you feel, right? And that way it has a time cap, so it's less daunting for people. Just do 30 days, see how you feel. If you feel amazing, great. It gives us a sign that you can kind of continue with that. If you don't really notice any change and it doesn't do anything for you, then there's no harm. You kind of can go back to what you were doing previously or investigate other areas.
I think we have to remember, though, people that do that, if they're young, the body does seem to respond a lot quicker and easier than as we get older. We have to pay more attention to that. I loved this because, in all honesty, like exercise for me, I've done ultras. I've pushed myself to be on stage in bodybuilding just to see what the body could do. And I've loved the extreme. Swimming is not my favorite, like my beautiful Cyndi, but when I do get in, I feel amazing. So I think there's something to be said. We both went to a course a while ago where they talked about to cross into the field of potentiality and possibility, or blast through what they called the 0 point field of that, is you had to get really grounded and present and very aware of your physical presence. And it's like I said, we can study and use all these tools and we can talk the talk and we can all share the mindset stuff. But until you've actually calloused that mind enough and actually really pushed through some boundaries, we don't know what our potential is. One thing I've taken away from you today is to actually embrace those challenges rather than, be fearful or stay comfortable. Cindy's got a beautiful quote around comfort. What is it beautiful around aging?
That aging is the relentless pursuit for comfort.
Love it. Yeah.
It is, because you look at, as we get older, we do more and more things that are comfortable, not pushing ourselves. So my aim is to become uncomfortable.
Yeah.
As
we that's a good philosophy.
That's why I did the 1.5 degrees Celsius water challenge.
Yeah. And that ties into that mindset perspective. The more you accept challenges and the more you start to seek out challenges, the better you'll feel. It's this weird paradox, right? And it's not easy to start with, but once you start, you'll start to notice you feel amazing. And then you kind of just catch the bug and you always want to be challenging yourself. And things almost become somewhat dull if you're not sort of pursuing some type of challenge in life.
Yeah. I'm trying to convince my beautiful podcast interviewer that we do things together, to come hiking with me with a tent. And
Great. I keep saying to her, so long as we take elderflower, lavender compresses, I have a few little comforts with me along the way, I'm happy.
I'll bring the lavender, I promise you.
I'm with you there, Cyndi. I love a good sort of overnight hike. I think I personally, especially for kids nowadays, I think all parents should try to strive to get the kids out for an overnight camp at some stage, even if they don't like it. Because it's going to be one of those things where I think later in life they'll be like, oh, that was actually a lot of fun. And you can detach from technology, detach from all the things and just be with nature and enjoy it.
And we cannot put a price on that, can we?
No, you can't. I did a recent hike with my daughter. She's in her 30s now, but she was probably 28, 29 when we did it. And we did 6 days around Carnarvon Gorge, like through the gorge and
Beautiful.
around. And it was the best experience. It wasn't just me and her. She brought a friend along, and then I had 3 friends, and they're all people in the health space. And it was just one of those magical walks. There's no support. There's no help. There's no all you have is a tank of water at a specific location to get water if there's none in the stream. So that's it. That's all.
Yep.
That's the only comfort we had. So
I had an injured knee for that.
Yeah, she had it. She did have an invitation, but you didn't come.
So sadly, maybe paradoxically, maybe psychologically, I created that injury to avoid that.
Taking you on an overnight this year, and we're doing Balumba.
I'll do it.
Balumba's a great spot. I did the Sunny Coast Great Walk with a friend, but we did it in 2 days.
Oh, gosh.
Was probably a mistake. It was a very long 2 days of hiking. It was pretty rough, but it's a beautiful area.
Where did you start? At the lake and then end up at Kenilworth? Is that one?
Sorry, not Sunny Coast. It was Kalula.
Oh, the Kalula. Oh my gosh, that's like a 4-day.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a 4-day. We did it in 2.
Oh,
yeah.
Geez.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
I bet there was a lot of uncomfortableness there.
Well, I just barely crawled out at the end. Yeah, it was very tough.
Actually, somebody that we're going to interview, and I'm going to put it out there, is either Cam or Daniel, who have just done from Mexico to Canada and have just done the 28-day Snowy Mountain. I'm going to get a hold of them and interview them. And yeah, they've got to have a mindset, because sometimes they walk through the night. Yep. And I'm like going, oh no, I don't want to walk through the night, but you're saying be uncomfortable. Maybe I do need to walk through the night. I know I've gotten up at like 2 a.m. to walk a hike to watch the sunrise. But walk through the night, like,
yeah, it's very different.
And then try, like I did 24-hour running around a 400-meter track. Try that. Oof. That's even more mind-numbing.
That would be tough. That would be tough.
And in England,
and then in a shopping centre, they were trying to make it more of a visual thing. But I just want to say thank you so much, you beautiful soul. You have just made it very simple, very clear. We're very glad that you're on, very close to us as well. And we invite you to come see us here on the coast. We would love to catch up with you personally. I've told my children about you. They all live in Brisbane, and they're athletes and they're amazing advocates. My son-in-law to be has just gone on to, did keto over the last, I'd say 6-8 weeks. His blood pressure's changed. His markers have come down. The visceral fat's gone. He's a top soccer player, football player. So he's really seen it and been listening to a whole lot of you amazing advocates. And I just want to say thank you for being a trailblazer. Curious, just how old are you? Or young are you?
I'm 38.
38. You've done a lot in 38 years.
Yes, I have. I think I've come to realize in my adult life there's probably some decent level of ADHD, which I've been able to leverage to my benefit. So I have done a lot of different things through my life so far, but many more to come.
Do you think type A is actually more a spectrum condition than these days? We label it type A to be nice, but maybe the type A's are on the spectrum.
I think so. I think politely. As we're learning more, about sort of these neurodivergent types of personalities and things, it's probably the case.
I love it. Just give us your website and how we can follow you on socials. We'd love to plug that as well.
Yep. So my website where people can find me, and if they want to book in, I offer a free discovery call as well, so we can just have a chat and see if we're a good fit, is richard-game.com. So that's for my virtual practice where I work with people one-on-one. And then my other business that I mentioned, which is Vital Origin, which provides the animal-based foods, and that's the organ capsules and the beef tallow. That's vitalorigin.com.au.
Okay, great.
And the same on socials?
Yeah, on socials, you can find me as Richard Game and as well Vital Origin.
Perfect. Well, listeners, I don't know if you're as excited and passionate about this as Cyndi and I are, but thank you so much for joining us. Cyndi, have you got anything final you would like to say to this amazing soul?
Oh, just thank you. I really enjoyed this discussion. My father always said, I like that man, he thinks like I do. He always used to say that. And it's true. When you have somebody that you align with and you have this wonderful conversation with, it's very easy flowing, and you like that man.
Yeah, I agree entirely. And I wish there were more and more people. I think the community is certainly growing, but it's always nice to connect with like-minded individuals that sort of share the same values.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/The Wellness Couch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.